everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I am your host Muriel, and in today's video I will be doing a hopefully short but sweet little review of Mary, An Awakening of Terror, written by Nat Cassidy. This is a horror novel I was recommended by a friend, and she said that she really enjoyed it, and she really wanted me to read it and tell her what I thought about it, so I was like, why not? I had a slot open in my, yes, I have a reading schedule in my reading schedule, and decided to add it in, because I have the time to do so. And so I went in mostly blind. I'd never heard of the author, I'd never heard of this book. I just went ahead and read it. And actually I read most of it flying to Ireland in October. The story is centered on a character named Mary. However, you don't get to Mary right away. The book opens up with a prologue? Is it titled as a prologue? I can't remember. It's basically a prologue chapter that is a little confusing. You have police officers coming into this big mansion. The chief police officer finds a dead woman in a bathtub. There's blood everywhere, and there is a pillowcase covering her head. And then further away into the mansion, you can basically make out that the perpetrator, the killer, has been caught. But they find other corpses, I think, in the mansion, and yeah, it's chaotic. And then you move away from the scene to a teacher who is in a museum. I think it was a museum. And it's closing time. And or was it a school then? A public building. You have a teacher and she's basically locking up the public building. And then she comes across this little girl who's around, 6 years old. And she's eating insects. And the teacher's like, what? Like, she's very shocked by this. She comes up to this little girl and she's, what are you doing? She says, well, I'm eating insects. That's how you feed yourself when you're lost, or something like that. It's very bizarre. And then eventually the little girl is carted away, and the teacher basically reflects upon this event and says, oh, if only I knew what would happen to this little girl or with this little girl. It's very ominous sounding. And then the next chapter, straight away, you're with Mary. Mary is a 50-year-old woman. She's basically starting menopause because she's not feeling well. She has hot flashes. She just, feels generally unwell. Also, when she looks at herself in the mirror, she sees her face sloughing off. Her face is rotting off. And that's what she sees. It's not actually happening in real life, but that's what she sees in the mirror. And every time she looks at another woman, she sees the woman's face, again, rotting away, sloughing off. Like, it's horrific. And she's like, I don't think that's normal. So she goes to see a physician, and the doctor is pretty condescending. He sees that she's a slightly older, middle-aged woman, asks her a bunch of pointed questions, and comes to the conclusion, ma'am, I think you have menopause. Of course, she didn't mention the fact that she'd been having these visual hallucinations, but she's trying to kind of edge around and be like, are you sure? Like, I really don't feel well. Like, my anxiety is through the roof. Is it really just menopause? And he's like, yeah, it's just menopause. You're supposed to take away from the scene that the doctor is being a condescending asshole in the way male doctors often are to female patients, when they don't take female complaints seriously or chalk it all up to hormones, whether it's menstruation, or in this case, menopause, the big life transition every woman is going to go through at some point. Mary is rather dejected. She goes back to her apartment, and you learn that Mary does not have a particularly interesting life, or a particularly happy one, although she's not that unhappy, but it's all rather grey, bland, and a bit boring. She works at a bookstore. No one takes notice of her. She's never been in a relationship, or never a serious one at any rate. She is, fired from her job. In fact, it's terrible. The manager kind of forgot that she worked there for a couple of weeks, and then was like, oh shit, right, we let her go. I should probably go and tell her. Like, that's how invisible she is as a person and as a woman living in the world. Then she receives a phone call from her aunt, who lives in Arroyo in Arizona, and her aunt is a bit of a bitch, quite frankly, very crotchety. And she's not on life support, but she has oxygen tanks. She's not doing great health-wise, and so she kind of begs Mary to come back to Arizona and take care of her because her own daughter fucked off with her lesbian partner. And you also learn that Mary's parents died years ago, and so she was partly raised by her aunt, and then she fucked off to New York to live a rather bland life. The only thing semi-interesting about Mary, besides the fact she sees women's faces sloughing off and rotting away, is that she has a collection of porcelain dolls, which I personally find a bit creepy, but to each their own. Lots of little porcelain figurines. She talks to them. She has a name for every single one of them, and she has a lot of them, and then she kind of, but not really hears them talk back to her. It's more just self-talk and inner monologue that she ascribes to her little porcelain figurines. And so, well, she lost her job, she won't be able to pay her rent, so she's like, I don't really have much of a choice here. She decides to fly back to Arizona to move in with her aunt and basically be her caretaker. The thing is, her hometown is a bit odd, shall we say? Because this is a town where years ago a serial killer killed a bunch of women. This is basically what happened in that very first chapter, the prologue. That happened in Mary's town. And I don't think it's going to surprise anyone. I'm sorry, this is not really a spoiler, but the little girl in that introductory chapter was basically Mary. So Mary doesn't really remember much about her childhood or her teenage years beyond the fact she was quite badly bullied by other girls. She has kind of these fuzzy, muddled memories of childhood and teenagehood. So she goes back to Arroyo, and Arroyo is a bit weird because she meets all these people that have a weird tattoo or like a little mark on the skin. There's one on the back of the neck of a taxi driver. It has an eye in it. And people are just a bit cagey, not fond of outsiders. It's that kind of setting. So she moves in with her aunt. Her aunt, again, is a bit of a bitch. Mary does not want to stay there, basically, but she doesn't have much in the way of money. So she goes up to what used to be that mansion mentioned in the prologue, introductory chapter, but is now a hospital. So she goes up to that hospital to see if she can find a job. Or, I mean, she goes to the hospital. Is that what she was actually doing? But she goes up to the hospital, it doesn't really matter. Ends up being offered a job as a filing clerk, because they have archives that are just a huge mess. There's a nurse there who is herself a bit of an outsider, and she says, do you want to help out, sort the files? All the patients' files, we need to kind of digitize everything, but yeah, it's a mess down here. We already have like a teenager working part-time down there. You can help her out and we'll pay you for that. Another little element I'll add before moving on is that then the thing is Mary starts to see a ghost in her aunt's house. It is very creepy. Her aunt's house is a mess. It's disgusting. There's mold everywhere. The dog shits everywhere. It's terrible. And so she goes to the bathroom to try and start cleaning so she can use it herself because she's really grossed out by the mold and the dirt. Ugh. But then she sees a dead woman in the bathtub. And the dead woman, I think, well, there's blood all over her chest, and there's a pillowcase covering her head. Just like the dead woman you see in that first chapter. So it's all connected somehow. And that's the story. Let's start with the writing. I did not like this book's prose at first. This is gonna sound mean, and I don't mean to be that mean, but to me, the prose felt like Stephen King light, or knockoff Stephen King. And to be clear, I'm saying this in a pejorative sense because I think Stephen King's prose is good, which surprised me at first. I've only read one Stephen King, to be perfectly honest. I read The Mist a couple years ago. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I was thoroughly surprised I enjoyed it as much as I did, because for some reason I thought I wouldn't really like Stephen King, for whatever reason. And Stephen King has a kind of prose I don't usually really vibe with, but it was actually very, very good. I mean, I guess there's a reason why he's such a popular and successful author. No, he's very good prose. But here it kind of felt like he was trying to emulate Stephen King's style. It just didn't quite make it there. But then I guess I got used to it. But yeah, at first it was just very choppy, a bit too familiar, a bit too informal, a bit too, I don't know, snappy, but in a bad way. I guess it suffered from the fact I just finished a trilogy of books, the Gale Song trilogy, which had very fluid and not particularly flowery or poetic or lyrical, but just very efficient, clean prose that read very easily. I went from that to this, and the contrast was a bit more violent than expected. But then I got used to it, so fine, whatever. It's told in, I mean, as you might have expected, first-person point of view. I mean, Mary is the sole point of view of the story, and you spent a lot of time in her head. I mean, you are privy to every single thought, every nightmare, hallucination, etc., etc. Okay, I mean, I guess it worked well enough. Well, it worked well enough, but there was also a bit of an issue with the story's tone. I said it was a bit snappy in a bad way. It was also a bit cheeky in a bad way. And like, it's not like you can't have cheekiness in horror, I guess, but you have some really viscerally bad things happening in the story. There's quite a bit of body horror. Fine. But then there's this really cheeky, bordering on the goofy at times tone that comes in, tied to the way Mary thinks about things, about herself. And it just kind of clashes. I don't know. That didn't really work for me overall. And then pacing-wise, it was a pretty fast-paced story. Like, okay, you have the introductory chapter, but then from that point forward, it's just go, go, go. Things just happening one after the other. Not in a way that felt jarring. It was all rather well executed, and then there's kind of a bit of a, ramping up of events towards the end, but that was all done in a way that felt organic and believable, so I didn't have an issue with that. But yeah, it is a faster paced story. The character work for its part, for me, was all right to bad. Yeah. Mary herself was fine as a main character. I can't say I liked her or really gave a shit about her. And again, I think part of that is due to the kind of cheeky, goofy tone she has at various points in the story. It's not that it's self-aware. I don't know how to put it. Maybe it's a bit too irony-pilled again. I think that might be part of the problem. You have these absolutely horrific things happening to her. And now, look, I love dark humor. Sometimes I think in a bit of a, I guess, weird way about certain fucked up things, because it can be a way of dealing with trauma and stress. So a bit of that would have been fine, but there's this consistent kind of off-key tone throughout the story, tied to the way Mary perceives and thinks about things. It didn't feel fully real or real enough. I'm like, would a person really entirely react this way? And then with regards to the story's antagonists, too many of them just came across as ghoulishly evil baddies or cartoonishly evil baddies. It was just kind of a bit over the top. This is going to be a weird reference, but at times, if you're familiar at all with the TV show Criminal Minds, at times it felt like that show it needed to up the ante with the craziness of the serial killer so much that at times you were kind of like, is this real though? Like this is a bit much. So that's the vibe I got in this book. I was kind of like, okay, oh, and now they're doing this. Oh, and everyone's totally chill with that thing? Sure. Okay, I mean, let's go with that, but I don't know, no. There wasn't enough character development to support a lot of what happens in the book. It lacked nuance, it lacked finesse. I was not a fan. There was, at some point, a friendship between the main character, Mary, and another character. At first, I was like, oh, it's an intergenerational friendship. That's kind of nice. In a way, that kind of reminded me of Eleanor Oliphant's Completely Fine, of all things. But that was quickly destroyed, annihilated, because that was subverted. I probably should have seen it coming, and then I was kind of like, okay, but then it also relied on a character being just somewhat cartoonishly evil, which wasn't great, so it's kind of like, none of this really feels real enough. And again, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter that it's, fantasy horror. There's definitely, she sees ghosts, right? There's a supernatural element to the horror, so obviously that's not realistic, but I guess, it's that whole verisimilitude thing. It just didn't add up, and I was not invested in the story. I just didn't care about the characters, about anything that was happening, really. So yes, I just said so. She sees ghosts. That's not really a spoiler. You get to that point very, very quickly in the story. So there is a supernatural element to the horror of this novel. There's a lot of body horror. And then, that town of Arroyo is a bit weird. If it's not obvious, there's a bit of a cult type thing going on. And there's a serial killer type thing going on. Again, not really a spoiler, you get that in the freaking prologue. The world building as a result was, on one hand, it was fun, but it was also doing too many things. It's the too many things problem. It had too many elements just going inside of its pages, and not all of it meshed particularly well. It was just a bit too much. It was just, oh, it's doing that, it's doing that, it's doing that, and then, there's a fourth thing, which I won't spoil, because if I mentioned it, it would be spoilers. There's a fourth thing, and we're also doing that. Although that specific thing, I saw coming from kilometers away. I call that so hard. Yay for me. As to the horror factor, keeping in mind, I just really don't easily get scared when I read something. I wasn't scared here. I wasn't even particularly creeped out because, once again, there was an issue with the tone in Mary's character writing, and then as a result, just the narrative prose. That goofiness, that kind of irony in the story just... No, I wasn't scared. I mean, I was kept engaged to some extent because it was kind of fun, but also I was like, okay, yes, there's some pretty visceral body horror. I'll give the novel that. And the supernatural horror wasn't bad. I guess it was all a bit pulpy, right? It was fun in a pulpy way. That's how I would say it felt a bit like a pulp horror novel. It was definitely not scary, like not even remotely, no. Now, this novel definitely has, well, that I could read out of it, a central theme. It does try to do theming. I don't think it does it well, but points for trying. The main theme of this book is menopause, and just misogyny plus ageism, which is channeled through the experience of menopause, because Mary is a woman going through menopause, and she says a lot about how she's invisible in the world. No one pays attention to her, especially now that she's a middle-aged woman. And there is stuff to do with sexual violence because there are female victims of a serial killer and sexual violence is involved, and I won't say more than that. So, yes, commentary about the fact women become invisible, rendered irrelevant past a certain age, which so happens to be the age at which we cease to be able to reproduce, and for some people we cease to be desirable or interesting as partners, romantic partners, sexual partners, etc., etc. So the interweaving of women as sex objects who suffer from sexual violence, but then also when we become old, we cease to be interesting as sexual objects, and so we suffer from a different kind of misogyny tied to aging as well. And it wasn't very well done. It wasn't terrible, but no offense to anyone, I could tell this was written by a man. It was just kind of very obvious. I don't really know how to articulate that feeling, but because I was like, was this written by a woman or a man? It's written by a man, and it shows. Not in the sense that the theming itself encouraged or promoted misogyny, not at all. It's a situation where I think the writer has had his heart in the right place. The story and its theming had its heart in the right place, but it was trying way too hard, and in a way that ultimately didn't really work or make that much sense. Because there are things that happen with Mary as a character that also just kind of clash violently with this whole idea that, you know, women suffer under patriarchy, especially as they age out of we suffer for being sexual objects when we're younger, and then we suffer from aging out of being sexual objects past middle age once we've gone through menopause. Just Mary as a character doesn't really make sense for delivering that kind of theming because of stuff that happens with the plot, and I'm just like, what am I actually supposed to take out of this story in terms of theming? Like, you were going at this idea and now that happened, and I'm kind of like, huh? Because again, the story suffers from this kind of weird, indecisive, at times goofy tone, and you have these bad characters, these antagonists, who are just kind of cartoonishly evil, so none of it really lands emotionally or credibility-wise. And then stuff happens with Mary where you're kind of like, I'm supposed to feel bad for her, I guess, but is she the best vehicle for feeling sorry about women who get older? Well, not feeling sorry, but like feeling empathy for the misogyny experienced by middle-aged women and women going through menopause. I'm like, really? Again, the heart was in the right place. Like, good intentions, but the execution was not there. It was trying way too hard, and in trying way too hard, the writing and actual storytelling suffered, and then the congruence of the theming with the storytelling just wasn't there. So that's my take. So ultimately, yeah, this book was a bit of a miss for me, but that's okay. I enjoyed myself well enough for the few hours I read it. It was fine as a one-off read, basically. I'd never read it, and I don't feel particularly inclined to check out any of the author's other books. I was fine. For me, this was basically a 6 out of 10. Worth reading once and no more. I mean, it's slightly disappointing that there was quite a bit of potential here with regards to the theming, but no, it was just a mess. I don't know that I'd recommend it. That's kind of up to you, whether you want a bit of weirdly toned horror entertainment for a few hours. You be a judge of that. For me, it was like, okay, I read it, I'm done, moving on. And on that final note, I hope you found this little review interesting, entertaining, informative, engaging, you know, all the usual good things that allow you to pass the time in a somewhat pleasant fashion. I hope you'll have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. Do take good care of yourselves. If you want to share thoughts and feelings about this novel, if you've read it, please feel free to do so in the comments down below. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you all at some point in the next video, but until then, bye-bye!